The flames tore through the night like a wild animal, reaching high into the sky as thick smoke curled upward. In the distance, sirens pierced the air, urgent and shrill. But the paramedics hit an unexpected roadblock. A woman in her 40s wearing a designer blazer and pearls, arms folded tightly across her chest at the front gate of an upscale neighborhood. Her face twisted in irritation, like they'd barged in on a country club brunch instead of rushing to save lives. "I'm sorry," Karen said, her tone dripping with the fake politeness of someone too used to being in charge. "But unless you've got clearance, I can't let you in." The lead paramedic, a man who'd probably witnessed every flavor of human nonsense, stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, this is an emergency. We got a 911 call about a house fire. We need access right now." Karen let out a dramatic sigh and glanced at her clipboard like a burning home was just a scheduling hiccup. "This is a gated neighborhood. We got procedures. If we start waving people through like it's no big deal, what's next? Erupts? Random strangers?" She scoffed. "I'm not unlocking the gate every time someone says there's an emergency. We have standards." Behind her, a few residents had started gathering, murmuring uneasily. One guy in a bathrobe edged closer. "Karen, just this once maybe? Just this once?" She snapped, laughing like he'd suggested a coup. "That's what they said about putting up Christmas lights in March. And look how that turned out. We're a respectable, organized community. If they don't have the proper clearance, they don't get in." The firefighter gritted his teeth. "Lady, someone could die." Karen rolled her eyes. "Or someone could be faking it. We have to verify." Right then, the wind shifted, pushing a heavy wave of black smoke over the group, stinging eyes and leaving no doubt a fire was very real. The stench of burning wood and chemicals hit hard. The firefighter turned to his team. "We're going in." "Absolutely not," Karen barked, planting herself in front of the gate. "I'll call security. Wait for authorization or face trespassing charges." A young paramedic mumbled something under his breath that definitely wasn't out of the training manual. The firefighter, clearly done, shot Karen a look like he was weighing whether yanking her out of the way was worth the paperwork. Just then, Karen's phone buzzed. She groaned and stepped back a hair to answer it. "Hello," she answered, voice crisp as ever. On the other end, a strained, breathless voice broke through. "Karen," her husband Todd choked out. "The house, our house, it's on fire. I am stuck upstairs. Help me." For the first time that night, Karen's cool composure cracked. Her face went pale, and she gripped the phone tighter like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "What?" she breathed. "The fire. Our house. Get them in, please, for God's sake. Get them in." Todd's voice was fading, with the sound of flames crackling in the background, sending ice down her spine. She spun around toward the firefighters, panic blooming in her eyes. It's my house," she stuttered. The paramedic she'd been arguing with didn't flinch. "Move." Karen staggered aside as the team rushed past, one of them hitting the emergency gate release. As the gate buzzed open, they charged forward, sirens wailing, engines roaring, vanishing into the smoke-thick street. Karen just stood there, frozen, trying to grasp the cruel twist of it all. She'd stopped the very people who could have saved her home. Her husband. The crowd nearby started murmuring. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with justifiable irritation. A woman muttered, shaking her head. "Unbelievable." Karen snapped out of her trance, heels pounding against the pavement as she ran after the fire crew. "Please, you have to save him. Please." By the time she turned the corner to her block, it was pure chaos. Flames licked the house, consuming it like dry paper. Windows had blown out, waves of heat rolling off the lawn. Neighbors stood outside, some visibly shaken, others with tight-lipped expressions that said karma had just nailed its landing. Karen's flawless life was going up in flames right in front of her. The perfect white fence, the imported garden sculptures, that massive custom oak door, all glowing red, turning to ash under the fire's weight. One firefighter burst from the house, Todd slung over his shoulder. His face was caked in soot, his body limp. Karen let out a broken sob, rushing to the stretcher as they laid him down. Todd, are you okay?" He coughed, eyes fluttering open. "Took you long enough," he rasped. The words cut deeper than she expected. Right then, Karen finally saw it. Her obsession with control, her rigid devotion to order. It had almost cost her husband his life. Mr. Whiskers, their pampered Persian cat, was being held by another firefighter, looking just as shaken. He let out a low, annoyed meow, like he was blaming her directly for the disaster. Karen stood frozen, unable to help, as they loaded Todd into the back of the ambulance. The neighborhood watched in uneasy silence. A few murmured. Some just shook their heads. Mr. Patel, the same guy she'd once ticketed over a garden gnome, too quirky for the community's look, took a slow sip from his thermos and said, "Well, guess the rules don't always work in your favor, huh?" No one laughed, but his words cut deep. Karen forced a swallow, throat tight, pride completely gone. As the ambulance doors closed and firefighters kept working to kill the blaze, the reality sank in. She'd spent years calling the shots here, thinking she was better than everyone else. But tonight, she was just another broken woman who'd made a massive mistake, one that had cost her everything. Karen's hand shook as she stood by the ambulance, watching Todd try to breathe through the oxygen mask. The paramedics worked quickly, checking his vitals, asking him questions, keeping him stable. But all she could hear was the roar in her ears, the sound of fire devouring the life she had so carefully built. The house, the designer furniture, the custom decor she'd obsessed over for months. It was all gone in seconds. But none of it mattered compared to the man lying there, barely hanging on, all because she wouldn't back down. She turned to the smoking wreck that used to be her home. The firefighters were still at it, but the house was beyond saving. Her pristine hedges, the elegant stone path to the door, even the absurdly pricey fountain she'd insisted on for the front yard, either burned to ash or crushed under rubble. It felt like looking at the remains of a life she'd tried so hard to control, only to realize she never really had a grip on any of it. The neighbors hadn't left. They stood along the sidewalks, some whispering, others just watching her with a mix of pity and quiet justice. She recognized every face, people she'd fined, lectured, and bossed around for years. Mrs. Clark, whose teenage son Karen had tried to ban from the pool for blasting music. The Andersons, who she'd once threatened to sue over a mailbox that didn't meet the HOA's exact color code. And of course, Mr. Patel, the guy with the outlawed gnome. Still holding his thermos, he watched her with a look that wasn't quite smug, but definitely not kind. Karen swallowed again and turned toward the security gate. She had once guarded it with everything she had. Now, it just stood there, a silent reminder of how wrong she'd been. The fire trucks only got through because they had to override the system. She'd built so many walls, both real and imagined, to keep control, and tonight, those very walls nearly cost her the one person who really mattered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. With unsteady fingers, she pulled it out and saw a flood of alerts. Her name was already blowing up online. Someone had filmed the whole shouting match at the gate. The clip was everywhere now, spreading like wildfire with headlines that made her stomach twist. HOA tyrant blocks paramedics. Instant karma. Karen refuses to open gate. Doesn't realize it's her own house burning. The comment sections were brutal. People were cracking jokes. Some were furious. Others just stunned. Everything crashed down at once. The guilt, the embarrassment, the ridiculousness of what she'd done. Her legs wobbled, and for the first time in years, Karen, the iron-fisted enforcer of Maple Ridge's HOI, felt completely helpless. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned and saw the fire chief, face streaked with soot and sweat, his expression impossible to read. "Your husband's stable for now," he said, "but you should be thankful the paramedics got here when they did." Another 5 minutes, and it would have been a different story. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. What was there to say? Sorry? Thanks? Neither felt like enough. The fire chief let out a breath, eyes drifting to the charred mess behind them. "We've seen a lot of things in this job, but tonight, that's a first." He shook his head and walked back toward his crew. Karen stood frozen, her cheeks hot, not from the fire, but from the shame twisting in her gut. She wanted to vanish, to wake up from all this and rewind to a time when she was still in charge. But there was no rewind, just forward. She drew a shaky breath and walked toward the ambulance, where Todd lay with an oxygen mask on. His eyes open when she came near. For a second, she thought he might say something to make her feel like it could still be okay. But when he spoke, his voice was raw, barely a whisper. "You almost got me killed." The words hit harder than any online comment, harder than the glares from the neighbors. Todd wasn't yelling. He wasn't blaming. He just sounded exhausted, and that made it even worse. "I didn't know," she whispered, reaching for his hand. He didn't pull back, but he didn't hold on either. "You didn't listen," he said, correcting her. "That's the issue." Karen blinked fast, her throat tightening up. She wanted to speak up, to say it wasn't her fault, that she was just sticking to the rules, that she'd honestly tried to do the right thing. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She'd ignored the urgency. She'd chosen not to listen, same as always. The paramedics began prepping Todd for the ride to the hospital, gently moving Karen aside. She stepped back, watching them load him into the ambulance. Mr. Whiskers, bundled in a towel, was placed on the seat next to him, still shooting the world a betrayed glare, like he'd been personally wronged by the night. The door shut, and just like that, the ambulance pulled away, leaving Karen standing there in the street, surrounded by people who had lived for years under her rules. She turned toward the crowd. The murmuring had faded, but the air still buzzed with things unsaid. She wasn't just the woman who'd lost her house tonight. She was the one who put control above people. Mr. Patel stepped forward, taking a long sip from his thermos. "You gonna be okay?" he asked, not unkind, but flat, just polite. Karen straightened up, trying to scrape together what little dignity she had left. "I don't know," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. For once, she didn't have a solution. Silence stretched between her and everyone else. Some people walked away. Some stayed, waiting for her to speak. Maybe to say sorry. Maybe just to acknowledge what had gone down. But she didn't know what they wanted from her. She didn't even know what she wanted from herself. She turned toward what was left of her home, watching as the last of the flames died out. She had spent years making sure Maple Ridge Estates looked flawless, and now she was its biggest embarrassment. For the first time, Karen understood she wasn't the one steering the ship anymore, and she had no clue what came next. Karen sat on the edge of a stiff hospital chair, her polished nails digging into her palms. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the room, a harsh contrast to the thick smoke she'd been breathing in just hours earlier. Todd lay in the bed, face pale, arm bandaged, chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. No machines were hooked up, which was something, but the tired look in his eyes said this wasn't just about the fire. It was about everything that brought them to this point. She had spent the past hour going over what to say. A simple, "I'm sorry," never felt like it cut it, and owning up to her mistakes had never been her strong suit. Even now, weighed down by guilt, all she wanted to do was explain, to spin it in a way that made it seem like maybe she hadn't messed up completely. But there was no spinning this. Her own rules, her pride, had put the one person she should have protected most at risk. Todd shifted with a low groan, adjusting himself on the pillow. His eyes fluttered open, landing on her with a look she couldn't quite read. Karen mustered a thin smile, but he didn't return it. "They said you'll be okay," she said, voice softer than usual. "Bit of smoke inhalation, but no long-term damage." Todd gave a slight nod, but the silence afterward felt suffocating. Karen swallowed, hoping he'd say something, anything, that might hint at a way to make things right again. But he just stared at the ceiling, his fingers absently brushing the scratch marks Mr. Whiskers had left on his arm during the chaos. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke. "I don't think you get how close I was to not making it." Karen's stomach twisted at how blunt that was. "I do," she said quickly. "I do, Todd, and I—" "No," he interrupted, eyes finally meeting hers. They weren't angry, just drained. "I don't think you do. Because if you did, you wouldn't be struggling so hard to figure out what to say to me right now." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but came up empty. There was nothing to throw back, no argument, no angle, just the raw truth of what she'd done. Todd saw all of it. He took a slow breath and shook his head. "I was calling you. Again and again. I could barely breathe, I could barely see, and all I could think about was how damn ridiculous it was that I might die in my own house because my wife wouldn't let the fire trucks in. Karen's whole body tensed. Hearing it laid out like that cut deeper than she expected. "I didn't know it was you," she whispered, though it sounded empty even to her. "That's not the point, Karen." Todd's voice was calm, but solid. It shouldn't have mattered whose house it was. The second they said there was an emergency, you should have gotten out of the way. Karen's nails dug into her palms, leaving tiny crescent dents in her skin. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she mumbled. Todd let out a short, joyless laugh. "That's the issue. You always think you're right. Always. It's never about what is right, just whatever you think should be. Rules mattered more than logic. Obedience beat out understanding, and control was everything." He turned away, and this time it nearly wrecked her. Karen's eyes stung, but she wouldn't let herself cry. Crying had never been her thing, especially not in front of anyone. But Todd wasn't just anyone, and something in her cracked tonight in a way she didn't know how to mend. "I don't know how to change," she finally admitted. It was the realest thing she'd ever said. Todd didn't respond right away. When he did, his tone was softer, but still steady. "Then maybe you should figure that out, because I can't keep living like this." Karen felt her chest tighten. She understood exactly what he meant. She wanted to push back, to say they'd been married too long, to just let it all fall apart. But she also knew Todd didn't bluff. If he said this, he meant it. Before she could respond, a knock broke the silence. A nurse peeked in, polite smile in place. "Mr. Wallace, we need to take you for a few more tests." Todd gave a small nod, eyes avoiding hers as the nurse wheeled him out. Karen stayed frozen in place, alone in the hospital room, staring at the empty wall. When she finally stepped outside, the sun was beginning to rise. The cool air bit at her skin as she crossed the parking lot. She had nowhere to be. The house was gone. Her marriage was teetering on the edge. The grip she held over Maple Ridge Estates was slipping away fast. She'd barely made it a few steps when she spotted a crowd of neighbors gathered near their cars. They weren't whispering anymore. They were looking straight at her. Karen pulled her shoulders back, bracing for whatever scolding, whatever jabs or judgment were coming. But instead, Mr. Patel stepped forward and asked, "So what happens now?" It was a simple question, but Karen had nothing to say. For once, she didn't have a strategy. No defense. She didn't even know who she was without the title of HOA president. She opened her mouth, then shut it. The words didn't come. A week later, the HOA held an emergency vote. The results weren't even close. Karen was out as president. The role she'd clung to with an iron grip was passed to someone else. And for the first time, the folks in Maple Ridge Estates felt like they could breathe again. Karen moved into a modest rental across town. No HOA, no gates, no rules to enforce. It was calm. It was plain. And it was lonely. The first few days blur by. She scrolled endlessly through her phone, watching the video of her turning away the paramedics go viral. The memes, the comments, the debates on whether she was just clueless or downright awful, they all hit hard. But what stung the most was seeing people who used to fear her now openly laugh at her. She thought about calling Todd. But what would she even say? Sorry? That ship had sailed. 3 months later, she spotted a flyer for a neighborhood committee meeting in her new area. They needed volunteers to help with events, settle disputes, keep things running. The kind of gig she would have jumped on in a heartbeat before. She stared at the flyer for a while. Then, for the first time, she walked right past it without picking it up,